It's my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Karen Thickstun. The theme of her talk is Times Change. We have all adapted our teaching for new generations and challenges. Equally important are up-to-date studio policies and business practices delivered with clarity, consistency, and communication. Karen is MTNA president. She teaches piano pedagogy at Butler University. She holds degrees in piano performance and economics from Duke University, business administration from University of Virginia, and piano pedagogy from Butler University. In 2019, Karen Thickstun was recognized by Butler University with the Woman of Distinction Award. In 2018, she was selected by United Way of Central Indiana as one of its 100 heroes to recognize the positive impact she has made in the community. You might have read Karen's column, The Everyday Entrepreneur for American Music, which I have always found really inspiring. Please welcome Karen Thickstun.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy. That was wonderful. Thank you all for the kind invitation. Let me just double check. Can you hear me okay? See me okay?
Yep.
Hope everything is great there in Seattle. Happy to speak with you. So many names that I recognize. Some of you I only know through Zoom and email, but hopefully I'll see you at some point in person somewhere, somehow. Of course, you know that Peter is my dear colleague on the national board. Great to see you, Peter. And Katie is my colleague on the Young Professionals Task Force. Thank you, Katie, for being here. And Katie, I'd like to know more about that Jazz Rags Blues Festival. If you or one of your colleagues could share some information with me about that. That sounds like a very relevant event that we should be thinking more about. And I know the young professionals have talked about that. So if you could share that, I would appreciate it. And Anne, thank you for mentioning the Forrest Kinney Publications resources. Honestly, I had no idea that was all still so active. So I will check that out too. Thank you. See, I learn a lot going to these local meetings, and I hope you do too. And I hope I can hopefully share some thoughts with you that will be relevant and helpful as you start a new year. But I'd like to first get an idea of who is here, because I don't know all of you. I don't know my audience quite so well. So I'm going to do a chat waterfall. I don't know if you've ever done that before. I learned that recently, a chat waterfall. So I'm going to ask you a question and you're going to type your answer, but do not hit send until I tell you to go. Do not hit return or send or any of those buttons. Just type your answer. And when I say go, everybody will hit send at once, and there should be a waterfall of information. But these are simple questions. I just want to get to know who is here today. So question number 1, how many years have you been teaching? Do not hit send. Just type your answer, and I will do that too. How many years? You can estimate if you're not sure. How many years have you been teaching? Hit send now. Okay, wide range here in Seattle. I think I saw 6 up to 50 or something like that, or 40. Okay, and that's what I expected. And many of our local associations are the same way. Great. Question number 2. You'll have to type a little bit more. Do you teach private lessons, group lessons, or both? So private, group, or both? Don't hit send yet. Are we ready? Go. So a lot of both, a lot of private. Great. Some group. Yep. Okay, great. That's what I needed to know. Next question. Number 3, do you teach online? Now, it's not a yes or no. I'd like to know if you teach none, like 0, you don't have anything to do with it, or a little, which means maybe you do makeup lessons online. You do a little bit here and there for certain reasons. So none, little, some, maybe you have hybrid. You have some families that wanted to stay online and others that came back in person, or all. Are you exclusive online? So there's 4 choices. Just type, but don't hit send quite yet. So none, a little, some, or all. And let me type mine and go. Great, we have a wide range again. And this is one way our profession is changing and something we have to think about as we move forward. Okay, number 4, what is your teaching situation? What I'm asking you is, do you do a home studio? Do you teach in an academy, a music school, a music store, something like that? Are you in higher ed? Do you travel to your students' homes? Online only? And it may be multiple ones, that's just fine, but what are your primary teaching situations? You could put multiple ones. And I guess we'll go because we're going. And they come in all at once. Thank you, thank you. So good, hybrids, private, home, yeah. And several have multiple locations. Okay, last question. And you might want to, don't hit send. Think about this one for a moment. I have to think about it. What is, in terms of business, in terms of the business of teaching, what is your biggest frustration or challenge? What is a frustration or challenge in terms of the business of teaching? So not necessarily talking curriculum here, anything like that. A lot of parent things may come into play, but it could be related, to accounting or taxes or something entirely like that. Think about that for a minute, a frustration or challenge. And if you know, let's go ahead and go. Yeah, a lot does have to do with the parents, doesn't it? Yeah, boundaries, taxes, scheduling, taxes, accounting, parents. That kind of sums up a lot. Hate to say that. Okay. But thank you for sharing those. And as I can, I will try to work those into what I'm going to say today. May not get to all of those. Really do to get started. Okay, I'm going to screen share a PowerPoint for just a little bit. I'll come back and forth if that's all right. And I hope now you see a PowerPoint. Thumbs up if you do. Thank you, Ryan. I saw that first. Thank you so much. And at this point, I can't see the chat. So if something comes up, one of you can shout it out to me if something I miss seeing. Okay, so I learned a little bit about you, and that was a nice introduction that Kathy gave, but I think it's only fair to disclose sort of where I'm coming from. My teaching background has been all over the place for many years. Certainly a home studio, I've had that since 1988. It's very, very small now, and it's actually no longer in my home. It's another location, but that has been a constant through my entire teaching experience. For 2 years, when I moved, I did travel to the students' homes in order to maintain my studio. So I have that experience. For 10 years, I worked at a for-profit piano academy in Indianapolis. Great experience because I could teach, and I didn't have to worry about the administrative stuff. Somebody else took care of it for me. I have been adjunct faculty at Butler University since 1998. And I'm primarily faculty in piano pedagogy. I teach currently only piano pedagogy and all of the courses related to that. And then I also teach through and have been director of the nonprofit community arts school at Butler University. I just retired from that position last year. I did that for 20 years. And what's unique about our community arts school at Butler is that our teachers are all Butler students. They're college students. So my job was largely mentoring young professionals and college students as they're just starting their teaching careers. And we grew over those 20 years that we had a wide array of private lessons, group classes, things like a youth orchestra, a youth jazz band, a theater program, a ballet intensive. It was across the board. And then many, many summer camps. As I said, that as of a year ago, I have left to somebody else to deal with. And then online teaching, yes, I've done some of that. Like most of us, I learned that in March 2020 on the go, just like many of us did at the time. And then I'd also like to share briefly with you my business background, because this is a business session. And I do have some credentials in this area, just sort of happened. But before I really started into the piano teaching profession, I was in the business world. I have degrees in that area. I got my MBA and was then hired as an economist for the US Labor Department. Great, DC, a great place to live and work for a couple of years, but that was enough for me. So I went on to something else. I was also an operations manager for a Fortune 500 company. Kathy mentioned the column. It used to be called It's All Your Business. It's now called The Everyday Entrepreneur. I've been doing that for 15 years. And yes, director of the Community Arts School. And I think most importantly, I survived a tax audit without having to pay anything. And quite an educational experience, not just for me, but for the tax person who had no idea what a teaching studio was. And that's what you'll find in a tax audit, that they just do not know what music teaching is all about. So moving on, I do have to note, please, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. So do not take anything I say today as advice from a lawyer or an accountant. I really believe to run our studios, it takes a village, and we need to hire the professionals that can help us do so in the most effective way. And I also can't go any further without saying something about antitrust law. We all love and know the FTC within MTNA, those who were around when that first started. All businesses in any profession are prohibited by federal law from engaging in certain activities that affect the marketplace adversely, such as price fixing, agreeing as a group to use only certain venues or certain vendors, or to boycott certain suppliers. As independent studios, we are each a business within the larger profession of music teaching. And as independent businesses, we are still accountable to those same antitrust laws. So that just means that we will avoid certain topics today. Now, many of these can be discussed in terms of historical prices and policies, but we cannot talk about current prices and policies. So just keep that in mind as we go through the session today. And then I'd also like to share up front, because we may reference them later, and you may be aware of these already, MTNA resources. Ryan mentioned the MTNA website. Thank you, Ryan, because I think there's way more on that website than I've ever explored yet, still exploring. But I want to make sure you are aware that there is a whole section now called MTNA Business Resources. This is just a screenshot of the homepage, but the business resources link is right on the homepage when you go to the MTNA webpage. It's in that burgundy menu right across the top, business resources. And once you click on that, you will get a drop-down menu with, oh gosh, I think there's like 12 categories now of resources. They include studio resources, marketing, legal, finance, career development, entrepreneurism, business planning, advocacy, community engagement, general, and general is where you'll find the member surveys, resource gems, and an archives section. So if you haven't checked out these resources, I encourage you to do so at some point. The legal resources in particular is the one I find that my pedagogy students and new teachers use quite a bit, because there is a great list of documents already created for teachers under that section, and they were created by the MTNA attorney. So for example, there is a photo and video release form. There's a COVID release form. There is copyright information, sample collection letters, an immunization policy or a discussion of when you can and should not do that. And then tons of things about studio policies. So if you're not familiar with those legal documents, I suggest you check it out. The second resource, if you're not familiar, is the MTNA Business Digest. This is a quarterly online publication that comes to you in your email once a quarter. The most recent one would have come out around January 15th. If you missed it, again, this is just a screenshot of it, but this is kind of a newsletter. The topics are going to be as relevant as we can possibly make them, because this is coming out to you. You don't have to wait for the AMT. You don't have to wait for something to get to the webpage. These are archived on the webpage under business resources in that item called archives. You can find it at the bottom of those business resources. So you can go back and look at all the past issues. This has only been going for about a year and a half, so there aren't a whole lot of past issues, but a whole variety of topics within each issue. This is the most recent issue. There was something about how to start a podcast, how to use Excel within your business, how to fund a startup business. And this digest is written by a group of young professionals, for the most part, who are also getting some experience in publications, but are also helping us stay up to date on the most relevant tools that we could be using in our business. And then the third resource, if you're not aware, that MTNA did a comprehensive member survey in 2020, and will soon be doing another follow-up survey. That's one reason I want to mention it. Please participate in the next survey. It's only as good as the number of people who participate. This is also archived under business resources, under general. And I just pulled a few things from it to give you an idea of the kind of information you can gain from this member survey. So for example, and these are summary information that somebody went through and compiled after, it was about 3,500 teachers that took the survey in 2020, which, considering we were deep into COVID, that was a really good response, honestly, that people took the time, and I appreciate that. But if you look at marketing strategies by independent teachers, I expected word of mouth to be the top thing that they reported, but I was really surprised that only 39% report using a website. So if you have a website, you're probably already setting yourself apart from many independent teachers. Now, this is across the country. And then I was really pleased, for example, when I saw the repertoire used in teaching summary. Of course, I expected people to be teaching classical. Honestly, didn't expect it to say 100%, but that's great. But more interesting was how much we are teaching all of these other genres like jazz, sacred, and popular. Like 60% indicated that they also teach popular or sacred music. So I think I don't have the data, but intuitively that tells me we are moving forward in those areas from what we were 30 years ago. And then just a couple of others, because rates is something, again, we can't talk about our current pricing, but we can certainly look at historical data. The FTC does not mind if we do that. Again, across the nation, and this was for 2019-20. So that's now 3 years ago. The national average for a 60-minute lesson was $56.58. If you adjust that for inflation and compare that, you go back to 2005 when we did the last survey, adjust that one for inflation, which was 43, but you adjust it for inflation, it's 56.98. That's the second box you see on the slide. Okay, that's not great news, but it's not the worst news either. We're keeping up with inflation, but we're not moving the needle of our profession very far towards recognizing the value I think we all know that we provide. And as we continue to do these surveys, we will be able to track what progress we are or are not making. I think the one that disappointed me, gosh, how often teachers raise their rates, and that some teachers said never. And many said only every 3 to 5 years. I'm going to talk about inflation later. This is really disheartening that teachers don't recognize what they're doing to themselves when they don't raise their rates often. How often I can't evaluate, and that's not my place to say. But this is the member survey, and I pointed out to you because it is chock full of other questions and information. It even breaks it down further when you talk about rates and some stuff. It'll divide it down by division for you. So the average in Northwest came in at 54. My division, East Central, at $52.97. So we're not too far apart. But Eastern is sitting there at 61. And if you're really curious, it divides it down by state. And again, we know the cost of living is different. Every state is different. Every city is different. So take this with a grain of salt. When I show this though to my college students, my pedagogy students, they're often willing to go anywhere in the country if they're not already tied to a city for family reasons. And you got California sitting on the top at an average of 83, and Mississippi sitting on the bottom at average down in the 30s. That's a wide range. I know it's a huge cost of living difference too, but gosh, Indiana's sitting down there on the low side, but my neighbor, Illinois, quite a bit difference. So my pedagogy students and college students are trying to make some informed decisions about where are some good places to start their studio if they have the freedom and the flexibility to move. So again, just an example of what you can learn from that kind of data. Okay, so it's January. Let's talk about January. For me, and you invited me in January, so thank you, because you helped me frame this whole thing just by telling me we were going to be here in January. Because for me, January is a great time to be thinking about essential business practices. For me, it's the time of year, it's halfway through my academic year, when we are often in a mindset to take stock about what's working and what's not, because I still have time to change for the spring semester, and I have data from the fall semester to help me make that decision. It's, for me, a time that I can reflect and evaluate and commit to change. It's also the time when I'm gathering stuff together for my tax preparations. So I've got my financial situation kind of in the front of my mind. It's also the time that I send a letter to my parents, these would be my private students, announcing the new tuition rate for the next academic year. I always announce it in January to be effective in September, because that gives my parents a full semester in summer to adjust, to make plans, or to decide to go elsewhere. But rarely has anybody decided to go elsewhere. So I feel like this timing just works really well for my parents. It's a time when I'm reflecting on the previous semester and what worked well, what didn't. And I'm thinking, therefore, do I need to change anything in my studio policy for either this current semester or the next academic year? With any change, I keep in mind that I want to achieve clarity, consistency, and communication. And that will be a theme for everything I talk about today. Are we achieving clarity, consistency, and communication? So I'd like to share a parable with you. If you've heard it before, bear with me. One day, an expert in time management was speaking to a group of business students, and he used this illustration. As he stood in front of the group of high-powered overachievers, he said, "Okay, time for a quiz." And he pulled out a 1-gallon mason jar and set it on the table in front of him. He also produced about a dozen fist-sized rocks, and carefully placed them one at a time into the jar. When the jar was filled to the top and no more rocks would fit inside, he asked, "Is this jar full?" And everyone in the class said, yes. And by the way, I've done this with my pedagogy students, and these are the same answers that they give too. The time management expert replied, "Really?" He reached under the table and pulled out a bucket of gravel. He dumped some gravel into the jar, causing the pieces of gravel to lift themselves down into the spaces between the big rocks. He then asked the group once more, is the jar full? By this time, the class was on to him and said, probably not. Good, he replied. He reached under the table and brought out a bucket of sand. He started dumping the sand in the jar, and it went into all of the spaces left between the rocks and the gravel. Once again, he asked, is the jar full? Now it's an affirmative no from the class. It is not full. And once again, he agreed. He grabbed a pitcher of water and began to pour it into the jar until the jar was filled to the brim. Then he looked at the class and asked, what is the point of this illustration? What is the moral of this story? So one eager beaver in the class raised his hand and said, the point is, and this is what every college student tells me, no matter how full your schedule is, if you try really hard, you can always fit some more things in it. No, that is the wrong answer. That is not correct. That is not the point of this story. The point of this story is, if you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never get them in at all. If you don't put the big rocks in first, you will never get them in at all. So what are the big rocks? What are the big rocks for us? Whether I think about my teaching or the business aspects of my studio, I often come back to this statement and think, what are my big rocks? They are my teaching philosophy statement. They are my studio policy. It is my core curriculum. It is my calendar. I take care of the big rocks first. There are fewer smaller rocks to occupy my time and energy. If I get the big rocks as close to perfect as I can, and they're never perfect because things change, then I don't have to deal with all the gravel and the sand, that gets in your shoes and it's just annoying. Get the big rocks done first. That's what makes us more efficient and productive. So I'd like to look at some of those big rocks today. And again, being January, this is a time when I tend to reflect on those and make my changes. And I am encouraging you, as I talk about my experience, to think, well, how does this fit my experience, my studio, my policy? What can I be thinking about at this time of year? So thinking about teaching philosophy statements, it's not something you do at the beginning of your career or you do in college and never do again. I hope you do it every year and revisit it every year, because I think you need to examine it. I need to examine mine, certainly, to determine if it is still relevant and still truly reflects me and what I am doing it and what I'm doing and what I want to do. Because let's face it, times change, but we also change. And now that I'm entering semi-retirement and headed towards full retirement, it's changing even more. And that's true for each stage of our lives. So for example, early in my career, a change that happened was related to digital and electronic instruments. At one time I would have said, you must have an acoustic piano, and that is the only thing I will accept students for, and that was it. And so whether to require or just encourage an acoustic instrument is now a big part of what I think about in my philosophy. Because another aspect of my life with the community arts school especially that has evolved is that it's incredibly important to me now that we provide access to music lessons for all children. And I am more and more aware in Indianapolis of how many children do not have access. It might be financial or transportation, but one barrier is having an acoustic instrument. So if they can get a digital or an electronic keyboard, that eliminates that barrier. And that's important to me because I believe in access for all children. So I no longer say you absolutely must have an acoustic piano or I won't teach you. I still encourage it, strongly encourage it, love it when students can upgrade. but I want to make lessons accessible, and therefore I do teach students with digital or electronic instruments. A second example is a current reassessment that I'm going through. I've never included much jazz in my teaching because I didn't feel like that was my strength, that I had the expertise, that I had the credibility, and I had some great colleagues in my area that it was their strength, it was their specialty. So for years, I have passed jazz students off to other teachers who primarily teach jazz. Well, those colleagues have now all retired or moved. And I was stuck and over the past year with two of my high school students wanting to learn a little bit about jazz. And I knew I could take them just so far, but it's making me reassess. Do I now want to invest in myself some more and learn more jazz, take a jazz class, take some jazz piano lessons? And yes, I started doing that last semester. So this is a new direction for me. And it's based on reassessing the philosophy of how I want to serve my students who have that interest. It was also a logistical thing that sort of forced me into making that reevaluation because my colleagues had all retired or moved. And then one last example that I personally have been rethinking a lot, reevaluating, and it goes back to something I do in my Pedagogy 1 class. Every fall, I ask my students to develop a list of criteria for evaluating a new beginner piano method. We look at all the methods, but before we do, I ask them, what's your criteria for evaluating this method? And so their lists typically include things like, what is the reading approach? You can guess what these are. What's the rhythm approach? How do they handle technique? Are the songs appealing? Does the method include creative aspects like improv, composition, the use of color, the sequencing and pacing of the method? Does it include ear training, theory, what all is involved? And that has been a typical list for 20 years. This year, for the first time, there's something new entered their criteria, and it landed in the top 3. Now, I won't say it came out of nowhere because we've all been talking about this for a while, but it now is so important to the current generation of teachers that it's in their top 3. And that was this: is the method inclusive? Does it represent different genres, different styles, world cultures, the non-Western canon, those kinds of areas? Is the method inclusive? It didn't just make the list, it made the top 3. So clearly that is a message to me as a pedagogy teacher and to our profession. It's certainly something I had already been heavily committed to. MTNA has increased their commitment to, and it certainly has caused my teaching philosophy to evolve over the past 10 years or more. But it means that I am now far more purposeful and intentional in my efforts to be more inclusive, and that has to trickle down into my pedagogy classes, not just my private teaching. So I just challenge you to think about your own teaching philosophy, what's changing, what's evolving, and to take a good look at it every year. January is just a nice time for me. If you need help with, if this is all new to you, you've never written a teaching philosophy statement, the great resource is in the MTNA certification workbook. Under one of the projects where you write the teaching philosophy, there are some resources and other things you can read about how to do that. A second big rock is the studio policy. And when we take care of the studio policy first, this big rock first, where we state and clarify our policies, then many issues are rendered non-debatable and parents are less likely to call or interrupt lessons with questions. I say less likely because some still do and always will because they just don't read. I get that. But the more I can state clearly upfront what my policies are, I have found the fewer questions and interruptions I get. You know, the studio policy is what spells out our ground rules for the relationship between me as a teacher and the parent and the student. And sometimes, I hope this doesn't happen too often for you, it serves as a tool when we get into issues with a difficult student or a litigious parent. But I also believe that policies must change with the times. And again, my goal with any change is that I'm improving my clarity, consistency, and communication. By clarity, I mean that my policy is easy to understand, that it's clear, it's simple, it's straightforward. The language is straightforward. Anybody can understand it. In consistency in this context, I mean that I treat everyone the same. I work very hard to do that. And communication means that everyone, me, the parents, the students, are aware of any policy changes. And I'll tell you how I do that in a minute. But what it really means, if I do this well, is that it's less stress for me, it's easier to manage, and it takes me less time. It's a time management thing too. So some policy changes that I've made over the years, and often you probably have found this, we make a policy change because we want to address something that happened in the previous year. You know, I never had a fee for bank charges until one year a parent bounced a check on me and a $25 fee appeared up on my bank statement. So then I added language to my policy that the parent was responsible for bank charges. Or maybe we want to change how we run something within our studio. One example, about 8 years ago, I changed how I handled payments for music. I changed to including it within the tuition. So I don't collect money separately for music. It is part of the one tuition amount. So I announced this change in my January letter to parents, and I said, effective with the fall semester 2015, music costs and other fees, such as AIM entry fees, are included in the tuition, period. With one exception. I spelled out one exception. Music for advanced students that needs to be specially ordered will be invoiced. And you can probably guess why I did that, because that is expensive music. And that I just didn't feel like I could absorb. So why did I do this? Number one, I thought it would be simpler and easier. Simpler for me, less bookkeeping, fewer checks from parents, fewer transactions. It all happens with that one tuition check. Number two, it eliminates questions from parents during the year. You know, the parent that asked you the next week, now, what was it I was supposed to buy? And it eliminated all of that. I took care of it. It helped the parents with financial hardship because I wasn't going back to them and asking for them for another payment. They often were already on a need-based scholarship, but this just eliminated those financial conversations that they already don't want to be having. And I was able to do this because I already had a pretty good idea of how much music a typical student will need, and I could figure out that cost and absorb that within the tuition. And I did this later in my career. I had a huge inventory of commonly used books that I needed to start getting rid of. So I already had this huge stockpile of books. So I wasn't going out and actually buying a lot of books to give my students. So that was kind of my rationale. It works for me. It has been a great change that I made in my policy. And I think the parents will agree it's just easier for us in the long run. So again, it was to improve clarity, consistency, and communication. Some other policy changes that are affecting many of us right now, and some of these don't apply to me directly, but they apply to teachers that I work with, or they may apply to you. Zoom has changed how many of us deal with makeup lessons. So our policies around makeup lessons may have changed to say that I don't do makeup lessons, but I'll be happy to see you on Zoom at your regular lesson time, or on a Zoom group class at the end of the week, or whatever it is that you might have found as a way to best incorporate Zoom into your studio. Many of us now have a photo or video release form as part of our policies. In this day and age, if you're taking photos of children, you really just need to protect yourself as much as possible and have the parents' support in what you're doing. Many teachers now have a policy statement about pro or con vaccines, immunizations, masks, or general health procedures like just washing your hands before you come to the piano. At our community art school, we implemented a new policy a few years ago that says a parent must walk in to drop off and pick up their child. A child under 12 cannot walk through the building alone. You can probably guess some of the things that led to that policy. You're on a college campus. You just can't let a child walk alone these days. Even if it's the safest campus, I don't believe. That was an extra safety precaution that we felt was essential. So we put that in our policy. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. So think about for a moment, are there policy changes that you have made recently or that you're thinking about making in the next year? Put some of those in the chat if you're comfortable sharing those, because every part of the country is different, and what works for me in Indiana is not necessarily going to be true in Seattle. If there's changes that you're thinking about making, this is a good time to think about it. And I encourage you every year to reassess your policy and see if there's something new or something you want to modify to make your policy more effective. So again, every year, my January letter, I also announced my new tuition rate. So I want to talk about rates just briefly. And I simply say this: please note that tuition will increase to this amount per hour, effective with the fall 2023 term. That's the sentence I just wrote. That's it. Please note that tuition will increase to X amount per hour, effective with the fall 2023 term. One simple sentence. And I'm amazed that no one has ever questioned that sentence. No one has ever questioned me in September about what the price is. It just is. Now, I do a lot to try to convey the value that a parent is getting. I do that in everything that I do. But giving the parent the time from January to September gives them time to make other plans if they want to leave me. And honestly, the ones that have left, and it's very few, it hasn't been because of the rate. It has been more so because they moved. I had some moved. I have some graduate. I have some. I'm very generous with taking a leave of absence. I have a student on a leave of absence now for a month because he's in the school musical. Because let's face it, he's with rehearsals every day and every afternoon, every evening. We both knew he wasn't going to practice. But that has worked well for me. So while we can't discuss specific rates, we can share reasons that rates might get raised. Thank you, Katie. Katie says we have an impulse to try to justify. And I tell my pedagogy students, take that word justify out of your vocabulary. I use clarify. Sometimes I will clarify. And my clarification, by the way, is according to the studio policy, the new rate is. Boom. And that's it. Parents understand inflation. I guarantee you, every professional they work with, their doctor, their dentist, their accountant, will raise their rates based on inflation at a minimum. That's just a simple fact. If you are not raising your rates to at least match the rate of inflation, then you are losing money. You are losing money because you're not keeping up with the purchasing power. And you can easily find the inflation rate. Well, right now it's in the headlines every day. So gosh, we all should know the inflation rate. But you simply Google CPI or Consumer Price Index, and you will find the inflation rate, and you can narrow it even down to your state. Other reasons that you might raise your rates, if you think of something, you can put that in the chat. And thank you. Is it Greta? Greta, yes. There are lots of parents who need financial assistance. And in Indianapolis, that is part of our core mission at the Community Art School. So we have always had need-based scholarships. And some of that comes from other parents that can afford to pay full price. And then some of that came from grants that I wrote to help subsidize. And within my own studio, you can make your own decisions about whether you want to subsidize or not. But I think that's depending on where you live and the students you work with, that's an important consideration. Reasons to raise your rates. Besides inflation, you may have improved your credentials, your skills. You've added an expertise or a specialty area. You've moved to a higher income area. You're offering new classes, expanded classes, more value. You've added group classes or a piano lab time, or you're adding more recitals or festivals or events. You've increased the value of what you do. Those are all common sense reasons that parents understand. Yep, you're paying for more. Prosume, yes. It is about the value. What is the value you are providing to the student and the parent? And that's what I try to focus my conversations on. What is the value you're getting for taking piano lessons? Every studio is different. Every studio policy is different. So I'm not suggesting you do anything that I do. I'm challenging you to question your policy every year and question your rates every year. Some years you won't make changes. And is there a time you never raise your rate? Well, there was for me. 2008, when the recession hit, I did not raise rates that year. And the September after COVID hit, I did not raise my rates. To me, that is compassion towards a difficult situation that all families were facing. I may have raised more the next year. I'm not suggesting the amount you raise is based on any one thing. It's based on a lot of things that come into play. As you're writing studio policies, if you're new to this, a great resource is a document written by the MTNA attorney. It's under the legal documents under business resources on the MTNA webpage. It's called Creating and Improving Studio Policies. And this document includes sample language. He does not suggest that any one model will fit all approaches to teaching in all types of studios. But what he does that I really love is he gives you 3 choices of language for any topic. So for makeup lessons, for example, he gives you language that conveys strict compliance, language that conveys middle of the road compliance, and language that conveys lenient compliance. So we all have our own enforcement personality. Are we a strict enforcer, or do we tend to be a little, we need to be a little lower key and not be quite so rigid? So he has language that fits those different personalities and recognizes, again, as I've said, all studios are different, all of us are different, all policies are different. So if you want some guidance, that is a reference I will refer you to. So no matter what your policy says, the name of that resource. So first go to, I'm typing it in. So first go to MTNA webpage, then go to business resources. I'm sorry, I don't have the link right handy for you. Then go to legal. And at the very bottom of the legal documents list, there is a document called Creating and Improving. Let me get it right. Studio Policies. Peter could probably look that up for me while I'm talking and put a link in the chat. Peter, you're really good at that on most of our conversations. Okay, so I can't talk about studio policies without talking about communication and enforcement, because no matter how thorough and articulated the studio policy is, it must be well communicated and enforced to be effective. I believe in annual communication, and there's many options. Hard copies, hard copy emails, however you communicate with your parents, through Google Docs, through your website, posting in the studio, utilizing more than one method can increase awareness and understanding. And you find with today's parents that they often need to see things more than once and in different ways. And I saw a video of a Utah studio recently, and she was walking through her studio and she pointed out that when you walk in the front door, on the wall right in front of you, thank you, Peter. When you walk in the door, the wall right in front of you has key policy reminders, and she puts it right there. The parent sees it every time they walk in the room. And then she had it other places in her studio, and she found that that was the best way to reinforce key policies that parents tended to forget. Enforcement is easier if your policy is up to date, it's simple, it's direct, and it's communicated thoroughly. But most importantly, your speech and your actions must be consistent with the policy's language. So I often begin an answer to a parent to their question with this phrase: according to the studio policy, this is whatever the question was. I treat it like a third party. I answer like I'm the business, not like I'm a person. And that kind of provides an objective, neutral way that keeps emotions tampered down a bit, keeps everything on a key, sort of a calm level. And then I'll quote Katie here: do not justify, clarify. See, I write that in every speech I give on this, Katie. Our choice of words accomplishes this. Instead of saying, I really need the money you owe me, you say, the overdue amount is X. And I would add, I also tell my pedagogy students this: do not apologize. Do not say, I'm sorry, but I need to ask you for this overdue amount. Well, you're not sorry, no. The overdue amount is. So don't put it in the framework of an apology. A simple statement of fact is what I try to coach my students to do. So in summary, studio policies, regular attention, updating it, it's well worth it. It really costs very little to take that amount of time to edit, to update, to communicate each year. And in the long run, teaching with fewer parent questions and interruptions while maintaining the professionalism and integrity of your business is priceless. That's where it pays off. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint for a few minutes. And touch briefly on a couple of other areas before we run out of time. Marketing and branding. Why should a parent choose you? An independent studio is only as good as the teacher. The teacher is you. You are the studio, you are the brand, you are the product. I believe that you, the brand, is the sum total of what you do. How it's presented, why you do it, that's your teaching philosophy. How you do it, those are your policies. How others perceive your offerings. If we define our product as high quality music education, then really we're talking about you, the teacher. It's not the method, it's what you do with the method. How you prepare each concept, how you prepare each skill and present it, how you reinforce, how you assess outcomes. But it's also your tone, your manner, your demeanor, your sense of humor, your personality, your communication style, your teaching style, your bedside manner with the parents, whatever that might be. And so marketing efforts need to convey your brand, what your studio is all about, what you are all about. A teacher who includes pop music in her studio makes sure to convey that within her marketing materials in some way or another. Kristen Yost in Texas, many of you may know of her. That was a core value of her studio when she started. And in all her marketing materials, she talked about the cool factor. She used that phrase, the cool factor. She still taught classical, but with a cool factor, because she also added pop music. Automated payments, absolutely, if that's the way you want to work. I know that makes great change. Shockingly easier. Yes, I agree. Depending on the size of your studio, not everybody feels compelled to do that quite yet, but absolutely, I would agree with that. Marketing. So I challenge you to evaluate what you are currently doing. How you marketed 10 years ago probably has changed and should be changing now for today's parents. Know who your customer is, how they seek services. Again, I'll use Kristen as an example. When she built her business in Texas, she realized that in her community, there was an online forum that parents consistently went to ask questions about activities for their children. So she made it a point to monitor that community forum every day. And if she saw a question about piano lessons, she jumped on and answered that question. You know, if a parent asked, what's a good age? She would say, she would answer that question. A good age to start piano lessons might be around 6 or 7. And if you want to consider piano lessons now for your 6-year-old, I am open for business. And she started building that through her community forum. Whether now or at a different time of year, you're taking a look at your current strategies. Do they need updating? Do they need a refresh? Think about your web page or Facebook page or whatever it is that faces outward to your parents. And I want to ask you 4 things. 4 things to think about as you're thinking about that web page or Facebook page or whatever it is. The current generation of parents. This all relates to the current generation of parents. The current generation likes visuals. Do you have photos of what it's like to take lessons in your studio? I'm not talking about a headshot of you, and I'm not talking about a group recital photo, but photos that really convey what it's like to take lessons with you, photo or video. Second, the current generation of parents pays attention to what others say. It's word of mouth, yes. It's related to word of mouth, but I'm talking about testimonials. Do you have testimonials in your marketing materials? Do you have testimonials that are interesting and compelling? They don't need to be long. They could be short phrases or intriguing phrases. Tell a story about what lessons with you will be like. That's what the current generation of parents wants to know. The current generation of parents does not read a lot of text. They scan information, and then they scan the next page. I'm not sure they ever read a page through fully. So can a parent easily and quickly find the basic information on your webpage? And is there a clear call to action button to click? What do you want them to do? And lastly, the current generation of parents prefers smartphone over all other devices. So how does your web page or Facebook page look on a smartphone? Think about how it presents. And in terms of marketing and branding, I also emphasize with my pedagogy students and young teachers, but it bears rethinking for all of us, that we pay attention to simple things, because we know that a random comment by a parent can instantly create a positive or negative impression that impacts somebody's decision-making. We know that today's parents do not hesitate to post negative reviews online. So we need behaviors that convey professionalism, integrity, honesty, and caring. These behaviors create strong impressions. And some of these behaviors, consider how you answer the phone. how quickly you return phone calls and emails, how quickly and effectively you respond to questions and concerns, how clean and neat your studio is, how organized you are during the lesson, after the lesson, before the lesson, how you and your employees are attired, and how you start and end on time. How you start and end on time. These seem like small things, but you don't know which of these are important to who. And they all are important in terms of creating a professional image. In all my years of running the community arts school, when a parent requested a change of teacher, 99% of the time, it had nothing to do with the teacher's qualifications or credentials. It had to do with the teacher's poor time management. They never could end the lesson on time, and a busy parent won't put up with that. They've got too many things scheduled. Or it had to do with a teacher who took days to return a phone call. Those are simple things, but they are important to today's parents, and they are important for our professional image. So the key to successful marketing, I believe, and retention is to make that good impression and then keep making an impression. You make an impression every time someone hears your name, reads about you or your students, or drives past your location. I always ask people who register or inquire, how did you hear about me? That tells me what's working. That tells me what's going to be most successful to continue. So consistent attention to marketing through purposeful strategies is what creates the most important impression of all, and that's the lasting impression. Let me stop sharing. Feel free, go ahead and ask other questions in the chat. That's a great thread you had going about automated payments. And then in the long run, your best resources are your colleagues. This is one of the values of an association. We are all in the trenches together. Again, we can't talk about current prices, but there's a ton of things we can talk about and support each other in. With 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes I have left. Is that right, Ryan?
About that, soft 3 minutes, yeah.
Soft 3 minutes? Okay. I only had 2 other brief things, and they're really things that pervade everything we do. So I'm going to go really quickly. And 30 years ago, I didn't talk about this, but now you cannot not talk about wellness. Wellness for ourselves and for our students, because nothing I've said today will work if you do not take care of yourself, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Self-care is essential. Make it a priority. And I'll give you 3 examples of things I'm paying more attention to. One is having a support system, and that's making time for people, making time for people. And that's where my local and state associations play a major role. They provide support, they provide connection, they provide friendships, they provide advice. And for many of us, we have lifelong friends that emerge from these connections. So I'm paying attention to my support system and making sure I make time to have lunch with that teacher I haven't seen in a year. Or recently, it's the ones I haven't seen for 3 years because we've been tied up with all that COVID stuff. Second thing, the acronym, I'll put it in the chat. SWEET, spelled like that, SWEET. Sleep, water, eat, exercise regularly, and time management. I didn't come up with that. I learned that from somebody else. It was a dean at another school. But if you are paying attention to SWEET in your life, you are taking care of yourself. And the third idea is creative renewal. Now, I'm going to define that in a very specific way. Our Arts Council in Indianapolis defines creative renewal as a project in a field that is different than your primary field. So I'm not talking about exploring a new composer in piano literature. I'm talking about the fact that I'm now taking a photography class and learning something in the visual arts, because how that will inform your primary field is different than how something like learning a new composer will inform me. And you can't predict how it's going to inform what you do, but it's creative. It's filling that need for your creative juices to explore and experience more, but it's doing it in a different way. So I encourage you to consider a project in a field different than your primary field. The other thing I found is when I'm working on my project for photography, my mind is fully there. And that is a release from whatever thing I was dealing with parents or students or whatever. I find it quite refreshing. And then also, I think we need to pay more attention right now to our students' wellness. Partly because we're coming out of a pandemic, but it's just more important than ever. And I see, and I think you probably see, mental health challenges now that we didn't see in students 30 years ago. And this may change how we teach in the future. One of my colleagues at the university, she's in the College of Ed, but her expertise is trauma-informed teaching. And she talks about dealing, and she says that's now informing, that now is affecting almost every child in the public school system. They have some kind of trauma that they are dealing with in their life that we don't know about. Part of that's my city. It's very different than where I live in a rural county, but it means that I'm probably being more flexible than ever, more patient than ever. I'm listening more, I'm adapting more, and I'm teaching more to the student rather than my agenda than ever. I've always done that, but I think more than ever now. And I think this is an area we need to keep informing ourselves about as we move forward so that we can meet our students' needs. Thank you for that suggestion for David Kessler. I'm not familiar. Thank you. Salsa dancing, love it. Love it. And my last point is around professionalism, and I can hit that pretty quickly. Professionalism, if you don't have that, then we don't have anything. I think that has to pervade every single thing that we do. But the phrase that you may not have heard that I use with my pedagogy students is professional integrity. Yes, we have personal integrity, but what I mean by professional integrity is this: integrity of the lesson. Does your 8 o'clock student receive the same enthusiasm as your 3 o'clock student? I try very hard to do that. Integrity of the studio policy. Do you enforce it consistently and fairly? Does it accurately reflect your teaching philosophy? The integrity of your qualifications. Do you seek improvements? Do you assess yourself and your students? So to reach a higher level of artistry, we certainly expect our students to practice daily with consistency, dedication, attention to detail, self-assessment, awareness. We need to demand the same of ourselves as we go about our daily business. Consistency, dedication, attention to detail, self-assessment, awareness. If we want to achieve a higher level of professionalism. Excellence is not an act. It is a habit. That's a quote from Aristotle. I use that a lot. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. The things we do the most are the things we'll do the best. So I wish you a happy year of joyful teaching. Thank you so much for letting me be here. I am not on a set agenda here, so if there's questions, I can hang around, or whatever you need me to do.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Would you please tell about sweet again? I got the first one was sleep.
Sleep. I'll write it in here. Sleep, water.
Oh, water.
Eat. I'm sorry, I may have skipped that one the first time.
No, I forgot.
Sleep, water, eat right, exercise regularly, time management.
Yeah.
And it came from a dean. It was Jose, and is it Jose? His last name is Bowen, Bowen. At the time, he was at a school in Pennsylvania. I don't remember what. But that was part of his platform with incoming students. That's what he talked to freshmen about. And I thought that was just such a great thing to focus on right off the bat, first year of college. If we don't take care of this, or of ourselves, how are we going to make it through?
Yeah, well, we don't have any energy to give to our students then.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. This has been really great.
Thank you so much.
Any comments also, if you just want to share with your fellow teachers? This is a conversation you can keep having. Oh, you mentioned those webinar discussions. That's a great idea, sort of a book club idea, but you know, there aren't many webinars on business topics in the MTNA archives, but there are a few. And
Usually
you have
at least one a year.
Yes. Excellent. But that's a great idea. Again, your colleagues, your association, I think, is the greatest resource we have within MTNA. I would not be where I am as a teacher without the people I grew up with in the Indiana Music Teachers Association. I think of myself as growing up as a teacher. I mean, I was already in my 30s when I started teaching, but I feel like I'm still growing. Every conference, I still go. I still love the national conference, not because I have to be there, because I love being there. I love the sessions. I still learn something. I just returned from the collegiate symposium, the MTNA Collegiate Chapter Symposium. It was in Texas last weekend. And I tell you, the college students have great ideas. The more we involve them in these discussions and conversations, great presentations. You know, they're thinking about all the same issues that you've mentioned, and all of us are trying to figure out.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed is I'm the Washington State MTA president, and going to visit all the local chapters. People love their chapter.
Yeah.
It's great. They love hanging out with each other.
Mm-hmm. And the collegiate chapters feel that same way. They have this incredible bond, traveling together, presenting together, doing activities on their campus. We just need to figure out how to get all the universities involved in that so everybody can benefit from that resource.
I know for me, teaching was, before I got involved with the MTNA, teaching was definitely a very lonely occupation, which is funny because you're obviously like fundamentally social with your students, but there's this kind of across the table environment, whether you want it there or not. And so to have somebody you can't say to one student, oh, I had a weird day with this other student. That's very awkward and relatively inappropriate. But you can talk to other teachers about it. And it felt like I went to my first state conference in 2019, and it was like finding an oasis in a desert. It's like, oh my God, I can talk to anybody at all. This is great. And there's so much to learn. Excellent
point.
And music teachers are so magical in general. Mostly, not everyone, but like it's I don't know, it's just like such a lovely intergenerational group, and yeah. I've learned so much just by talking to people and being involved.
That's interesting you use the word intergenerational, you know, and that is so true. So true. One of my and a lot of professions that's not true. I'm contrasting it that way. A lot of professions that's not true. But you know, one of the connections that I told you, I was trying to make more time for personal connections and such. And I went to visit our oldest member, who's 97, in an assisted living home. A couple of us went to visit her a couple of weeks ago. And then I have just as much fun hanging out with the collegiate members. You know, and what other profession can you do that? It's very special.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Well, I have a question. Maybe this is too nitty gritty, but how how much detail do you go into in your policies? Because I'm thinking it could turn into a giant document as you add each new situation you encounter. How do you find the right balance between overgeneralizing and getting really detailed? And in what format do you like to present your policies? And what's the timing, at the initial interview, or, and do you post it on your website or that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I have to answer that in several different ways. I'll start with the community arts school because that's the most recent thing I've worked with. So we post the policy. It's on the website. Anybody can see it at any time. Honestly, I keep it to 2 pages or less. I make short, simple statements. I don't try to cover every possible scenario. It goes back to the big rocks. So what are the most important things that we need to cover? And that's a few of those are the makeup lessons, payments, how tuition works, that kind of thing. My home studio, because I'm phasing it out, honestly, I don't have a website for my home studio. And I communicate through email and hard copy with my parents, the ones that are left. That's 1 page. Yes, absolutely. At the interview, I go through every policy. I allow ample time for interviews. I interview every student if they're going to come to my home. Always did. I learned that. Okay, I kind of learned that one the hard way. Once you accept somebody you didn't interview and then it's a poor fit. When I was young, I didn't know better, I guess. So I didn't quite do that. So there's tons and tons of policies online you can look at. And if you look at language that others have used, you look at the document that the lawyer wrote, some of that is very simple, straightforward language. Ultimately, you have to decide what are the most important things for you to put in there. And I don't think you can over communicate. If there's other times, please add to the chat here if you have particular things that you find essential for your policy or that you now do because you learned the hard way that you did. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. There's no one answer, but the language, if you look at the language, it's very simple and straightforward. And that's what cuts down the length. The ones I read when my students write their first policies, they try to explain everything. They try to explain, Katie, they try to justify everything. The rate is such and such. This is because because I have prep time and because, yes, there are ways, but we can communicate that value through what we do. We can show that in our actions, in every lesson, in every interview, in everything we do.
Any justification just gives them permission to argue.
Yeah.
or like question, but nobody cares. I've never had anybody care that I raise my rates. Like, if anything, I don't know. I think it's perceived value, right? The more you charge, the more people think you're worth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing. I'll take a look at that later.
Oh yeah, I mostly being in this group has taught me the value of using Google Forms and specifically polls. And it's a really easy way to store the results, so I don't end up like hunting around for like, where was that permission again? Where did I get that? I can just say, well, I open up the form and I have all the responses in here. It's great.
Yeah.
And yes is the only answer you can give.
So many new tools nowadays that I didn't have when I started teaching. So many great tools.
Never apologize, never explain. That's
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Karen. And thanks, Peter, too. And Ryan.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope to see you. Anybody coming to the Reno conference?
some of
Look
us.
me up. catch me in the hallway if you do and say, hey, do you remember me? I was on the Zoom call. Because I have a hard time remembering people from Zoom because they're always taller than I thought they were going to be.
Well, and they don't walk around probably with their name nicely situated. Maybe they do if they get a big old name tag or something. But
Exactly. Well, I look forward if you can come to Reno. This will be my last conference as president. Peter will be, your colleague, will be taking over at the end of March. That's exciting. And then if you don't make it to Reno, we have Atlanta coming up the next year. So hope to see you somewhere in person sometime.
Thank
you
you,
again.
Karen. This has been great.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
bye bye.